All right, so questions 9 and 10 for test review 3, they give us 4 graphs, A, B, C, and D, and they give us 4 functions. And it says match the functions to the graphs, okay? And the first thing I want to point out is that 2 of the functions do not have a negative on the front, and 2 of the functions do have a negative on the front, okay? And it's important to understand that when there's a negative on the front of a polynomial, whether it is in standard form or factor form, okay? Now it's important, you have to make sure that you know, because sometimes they'll put the x over here. But once you multiply it out, if it winds up being a negative lead coefficient, this is a positive lead coefficient. If it's a negative lead coefficient, then that means that the right side of the graph is going to point down, okay? And so we know for sure that this one right here, because the right side points down, we know that this one has a negative lead coefficient, okay? This one, the right side points up, so this one must have a positive lead coefficient. For this one, the right side points up, so this one also has a positive, a positive lead coefficient. And then D here points down on the right-hand side, so this one has a negative lead coefficient, okay? And that means that this one that has a negative lead coefficient, it must be either A or D, okay? And this one down here with a negative lead coefficient, that has to be A or D also. This one has a positive lead coefficient, so this one must be B or C. And this one also has a positive lead coefficient, so it must be B or C, okay? And so that's one way that you can start these, is you can sort of identify which ones are possible and which ones are not possible, okay? Now, we're gonna identify the graph based on these zeros here. Do you see where it crosses over, where the graph crosses over the x-axis at these points? Let me highlight those again. Right here, and right here. The graph is cutting through the x-axis, okay? And when we look at the graphs here, in fact, we can look at this one. Let's look at B, okay? We know that this one could be B, and we know that this one could be B. But notice, this one says x plus 2, and this one says x minus 2. This one says x minus 3 and x minus 5. This one says x plus 3 and x plus 5. Well, those are the indicators about whether we're going to select B or C, okay? So x plus 2 means that it has a 0 of x equals minus 2. X minus 3 means that it has a 0 of x equals positive 3. And x minus 5 means that it has a 0 of x equals positive 5. So we're looking for one that has a negative 2, a positive 3, and a positive 5. Well, maybe B does, okay? Maybe this is negative 2, and maybe this is positive 3. But if this is negative 2 and this is positive 3, then what is this one over here? What is that, negative 5? Well, we need positive 5. So it's not possible for B to be this one right here. So let's try C. Okay, so it's very possible that this is negative 2, and that this is positive 3, and that this is positive 5. Therefore, this one must be C. And that must mean that this one has to be B. And we can be sure, we can see that this is, because it has x minus 2, it's going to have a 0 at x equals 2. It's also going to have one because of x plus 3. It's going to have a 0 at x equals negative 3. And it's also going to have one at negative 5. And so let's look at B. And sure enough, this could be 2, this could be negative 3, and this could be negative 5. Okay? Let's do the same thing for A and D. Okay? So it looks like A, or it looks like this one right here is going to have a 0 at negative 2, positive 3, and positive 5, okay? And so we're looking for either A or D that has 1 negative and 2 positives. Well, this is 2 negatives and 1 positive. I need 1 negative and 2 positives, so it's very possible that this is negative 2, and that this is 3, and that this is 5. and therefore this one must be D, and that makes this one A. And we can make sure this one has to have a positive 2, a negative 3, and a negative 5, and sure enough, we have a positive 2, a negative 3, and a negative 5. And that's how we identify the graphs, that's how we match these graphs to these functions.